Think you know everything about the Catholic popes? Well, buckle up because you're about to discover some completely useless facts that will surprise you and maybe even make you laugh. But first, don't forget to subscribe to the Mouth That Tells It All channel and smash that like button. Let's dive in. The traditional hat worn by popes is called a mitre, and no, it doesn't have Wi-Fi, despite its futuristic look. The youngest pope in history, John XII, was only 18 years old. So while you were in high school, he was managing the church. Pope John Paul II was a theater actor before becoming pope. He almost ended up in Hollywood. Pope Formosus was exhumed to be put on trial. Yes, you heard that right. Tried while dead. There was a pope with the same name as a comic book hero, Leo I, the Great. Coincidence or inspiration? We'll never know. Pope Pius IX was the longest reigning pope. He ruled for 31 years and 7 months. Can you imagine wearing the same outfit for that long? The Vatican is the smallest country in the world, but it still has its own army. Okay, they use swords, so no need to panic. Did you know that Pope Nicholas V authorized the construction of the first public library in Rome? One pope once wrote a treatise on bats. That's right, a pretty vampiric study. Pope Gelasius I invented Valentine's Day. So if you're single on February 14th, you know who to blame. Pope Gregory IX declared war on black cats. Yes, they were associated with witches and persecuted. John Paul II was the first pope to set foot in a synagogue, showing that sometimes you can build bridges even without a miracle. There was a pope called Innocent VIII who was anything but innocent. He had 8 children. Kind of ironic, right? Pope Stephen VI was responsible for the posthumous trial of Formosus and the bizarre cadaver synod. Yes, they really took a corpse to court. The Vatican once had a comet named in its honor, the Comet of the Holy See, discovered by the Vatican astronomer. Pope John XXI was once on the cover of Time magazine. Yeah, they had style back then. The largest Catholic basilica in the world isn't in the Vatican, but in Ivory Coast. Pope Urban II was the one who initiated the Crusades. A kind of medieval reality show full of epic battles. Pope Adrian VI was the last non-Italian pope for 455 years, until John Paul II broke that streak in 1978. Did you know there's an exclusive Vatican postal service? If you receive a letter from there, it's because you really did something grand. Pope John Paul I was on the throne for only 33 days. One of the shortest reigns in history. Pope Gregory I is known as the Great. He was the first to be called that, but honestly, we're still waiting for Pope Awesome or Pope Spectacular. There was a time when 3 popes competed for the throne at the same time. Kind of like a papal big brother. Pope Sixtus V decided to number the streets of Rome. It was the beginning of medieval GPS. Pope Julius II was known as the warrior pope because he led armies. Maybe he confused the concept of spiritual sword. John XXI was a pope who believed in astrology. The Vatican never revealed if he knew his own future. During Benedict IX's papacy, he was excommunicated twice and resigned twice. Must have had a papal midlife crisis. Pope Francis was once a bouncer in his youth. We just hope he stayed away from bar fights. Pope Boniface VIII decreed that the sin of sodomy was worse than murder. Priorities were, let's say, different. In 1798, Napoleon imprisoned Pope Pius VI. Seems like the papacy didn't impress him. Pope Alexander VI was part of the notorious Borgia family, known for their intrigues and scandals. Almost like a modern drama series. The ring that popes wear, called the Fisherman's Ring, is destroyed after each pope's death. No inheritance in this case. There was a pope called Agapetus. And no, he wasn't the inventor of bubble gum. Pope Clement VII almost died during the sack of Rome in 1527. A tense day at the office. Pope John XXI died crushed by the ceiling of his own palace. Who said being pope isn't risky? Pope John Paul II survived an assassination attempt in 1981. miracle, or ninja skills? We'll never know. Benedict XVI was the first pope to retire in almost 600 years. Time to relax, right? Pope Innocent III led the Fourth Lateran Council, which defined the concept of transubstantiation. Did you know this involves bread and wine turning into Christ's body? Pope Leo XIII wrote an encyclical about the Industrial Revolution. Imagine him trying to use a smartphone today. Pope John XXII loved making wine and was known for supporting winemakers. How about a glass, Your Holiness? Pope Sergius III is suspected of ordering the execution of another pope. Papal drama at Game of Thrones level. Pope John XV was the first to officially canonize a saint. I bet he had a huge list of candidates. Pope Julius II was the one who commissioned Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling. Little did he know it would take for years and cause a lot of back pain. Pope Honorius III was responsible for approving the Franciscan order. He must have really liked humility or simple sandals. Pope John XXI was the only pope who was also a doctor. Which leads us to the question, did he prescribe blessings and medicine at the same time? Pope Benedict VIII was the first pope to mint coins with his image. And thus, the concept of papal merchandising was born. Pope Paul VI was the first to travel by plane. He must have been impressed by not needing miracles to fly. Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar, which we use to this day. So, if you hate Mondays, you know who to blame. Pope Innocent VIII was so hated that, after his death, rumors said he had been kept alive by blood transfusions from children. Kind of vampiric, isn't it? Pope John Paul II survived more than one assassination attempt. Either he was very lucky, or someone in heaven was keeping a close eye on him. Pope Adrian IV was the only English pope. And yet, he didn't have a British accent. Pope Leo X loved extravagant parties and even hunted elephants. When they say the papacy is modest, he definitely wasn't the example. Pope Urban VIII loved poetry so much that he wrote several Latin poems. We don't know if they rhymed, but they were certainly inspiring. Pope Sixtus IV inaugurated the famous Sistine Chapel, which bears his name. He just missed signing the ceiling. Pope Clement VII was once imprisoned in Castel Sant'Angelo while the army looted Rome. Certainly not his best day as pope. Pope John Paul II was an avid skier and loved winter sports. Just imagine him in a cassock and skis going down the mountains. Pope Benedict XIV was obsessed with science and supported the study of fossils and astronomy. He would be proud of the number of alien theories today. Pope Eugene IV was expelled from Rome by the citizens. Apparently, they wanted more bread and less preaching. Pope John XXI was known for his sense of humor. He used to joke about his own height and weight. A humble pope, but with good punchlines. Pope Pius XII was a big fan of Western movies. He could have been the cowboy pope if he wasn't so busy with World War II. Pope Alexander VII had architect Bernini build a square with columns in the Vatican. All to impress visitors and ensure good photos. Pope Leo XIII was the first pope to be filmed on video. What would he think of YouTubers today? Pope John Paul I was nicknamed the Smiling Pope for his good humor. Unfortunately, his reign was short, but his smile is still remembered. Pope John XXI convened the Second Vatican Council, an event that modernized the Church. Who would have thought he'd be responsible for a spiritual update? Pope Boniface VIII was the first to declare that there is no salvation outside the Church. A bit drastic, but he wasn't known for diplomacy. Pope Clement VIII loved coffee and helped popularize it in Europe. Yes, you can thank him for your morning energy boost. Pope Paul III was a great art fan and sponsored many Renaissance artists. He would be the equivalent of a TikTok sponsor today. Pope Pius XI was the first to broadcast a speech on the radio. Imagine people's excitement hearing the Pope's voice directly on their little radios. Pope Leo I, the Great, managed to convince Attila the Hun not to invade Rome. An impressive feat for someone wearing just a cassock and armed with words. And last but not least, Pope Francis is the first Jesuit pope. He's known for his simple style and for preferring a Fiat to a luxury car. I bet he saves on both fuel and travel blessings. Those were some useless facts about the Catholic popes. Who would have thought that besides being spiritual leaders, they also had so many curious and even bizarre stories? Now, when you hear about a pope, maybe you'll remember one of these facts, and who knows, even impress your friends with these curiosities. Until the next video.